Travis sat alone in his office, the glow of the computer screen casting tired shadows across his face. His inbox was overflowing. Angry emails, bitter complaints, harsh reviews, cold food, rude service, long wait times, words that pierced deeper than they should have. He rubbed his temples, struggling to make sense of it. This wasn't just any restaurant, it was his restaurant. One of 15 he had painstakingly built from the ground up. Each location was meant to be a reflection of his values: integrity, care, excellence. But lately, one store had become a glaring stain on that legacy. He'd asked James, his district manager, for answers. What he got instead were vague excuses. "We're short-staffed," James had shrugged. "People don't want to work anymore." But Travis wasn't buying it. He knew from experience that a bad reputation doesn't stem from low headcount. It stems from poor leadership. Leadership that fails to inspire, to guide, to be accountable. So, he made a choice. He would go undercover. With a shaggy beard, thick glasses, and a faded hoodie, he transformed from CEO to anonymous customer. Most employees had never seen his face, only his name on training manuals or email headers. It was the perfect disguise. As he stepped into the troubled location that afternoon, the first thing that hit him was the smell. Old, scorched grease that clung to the air like a warning sign. His shoes stuck to the floor with every step. Tables sat unwiped. The trash bin overflowed by the entrance. It was more than just a mess. It was neglect. A kind of quiet decay that screamed louder than any Yelp review. Behind the counter stood a young woman with dark circles under her eyes. Early 20s, maybe younger. Her name tag read Emily. She mustered a half-hearted smile. "Welcome. What can I get you?" He scanned the overhead menu. "Cheeseburger combo, please." Her fingers tapped sluggishly at the screen, her posture weary. "That'll be $8.50. As he handed her a 10, a sharply dressed woman in a business suit approached the counter, frustration radiating off her like heat. "I ordered over 20 minutes ago," she snapped. "Where's my food?" Emily flinched, visibly startled. "I'll check on it right now," she said quickly, turning toward the kitchen. But before she could move, a sharp voice cut through the tension. "If you wanted fast food, lady, you should have gone somewhere else." The words came from a man leaning lazily against the counter, clad in a manager's uniform. His name tag read Greg. Travis's eyes narrowed. Greg didn't look overwhelmed. He looked annoyed, like a man inconvenienced by having to do his job. The woman's face flushed red. "Excuse me." Greg rolled his eyes. "We're short-staffed. You'll get your food when it's ready. Complaining won't cook it any faster." The woman stared in disbelief, scanning the room as if expecting someone, anyone, to intervene. But no one did. Emily stood frozen. The kitchen staff avoided eye contact. It was like watching a silent surrender unfold in real time. "That's ridiculous," the woman said, shaking her head. "I want a refund." Greg shrugged, dismissive. "Fine, but next time, don't come back if you can't be patient." Something inside Travis snapped. This was why his reviews had tanked, why morale had crumbled, why customers weren't coming back. He turned toward the kitchen and saw a young worker, barely more than a kid, dashing between stations, clearly overwhelmed. Meanwhile, Greg leaned on the counter, thumbs flying across his phone screen, utterly detached. Travis clenched his jaw. He took the tray when his food was finally handed to him, but he didn't eat. Instead, he found a corner booth and sat down, his untouched meal in front of him. And he watched. He watched Emily offer sincere apologies to every customer, taking the blame for delays she didn't cause. He saw the teenage cook sweating as he scrambled to keep up, and all the while, Greg remained rooted to his spot, barking occasional orders, more out of boredom than urgency. Travis's appetite was long gone, replaced by a deep, simmering disappointment. But beneath that was something else. Resolve. Greg had no idea who he had just humiliated in front of a line of customers. No clue that the man in the hoodie wasn't just another angry diner. But by the end of the day, he would. Travis shifted his gaze back to Emily, watching her move with quiet desperation. She hadn't stopped once since he'd arrived. She juggled the register, consoled frustrated customers, even ran back into the kitchen to assist during the rush. She was clearly spread too thin, each task piling onto her like bricks in a backpack, and yet she never once raised her voice, not even when Greg ignored her repeated, polite calls for help. Then came a sharp clatter from the back. A tray of fries crashed to the floor. The young employee, barely more than a boy, muttered a flustered apology as he dropped to his knees to clean the mess. His hands trembled with a mixture of fear and fatigue. From the front, Greg's voice sliced through the tense silence. "Unbelievable, you can't even handle fries?" The teenager froze, his shoulders tightening, fists balling on the sticky floor. Travis could see the shame and fury ripple across the boy's face, emotions too big for someone so young to carry alone. Before the moment escalated, Emily stepped in, her voice firm but measured. "It was an accident. He's been working hard all day." Greg scoffed without looking up. Maybe if he paid attention, he wouldn't be making mistakes. That was the last straw. Travis slid his untouched tray aside and stood. His heartbeat pounded like a war drum in his chest as he approached the counter. "Hey," he said, his tone calm but resolute. "Can I speak to the manager?" Greg barely lifted his eyes from his phone. "You're looking at him." Travis studied him, his slouched posture, his indifference, the arrogance in every lazy movement. "You run this place?" Greg pocketed his phone with a sigh, as if the conversation bored him. "Yeah." Travis gestured broadly to the chaos around them. "This is what you call managing?" Greg's face hardened. "You got a problem, buddy." "I do," Travis replied, his voice sharpening. "I've been sitting here for 30 minutes, and all I've seen is a mess. Employees running themselves ragged, while you do nothing but stand here, scrolling through your phone." Greg let out a cynical laugh. "You think you know how this works? You don't. We're drowning here, we're short-staffed, and people like you don't get it." But Travis didn't blink. "No, you're not short-staffed, you're poorly managed." The smile dropped from Greg's face. "If you don't like it, don't eat here." "You're right," Travis said, reaching into his back pocket. "I won't be eating here, but not for the reason you think." He pulled out a wallet and slid a business card across the counter. Greg glanced at it casually, then froze. The color drained from his face. His eyes flicked from the card to Travis, then back again. The reality hit him like a punch. "You," he stammered. "You're the..." Travis nodded. "I own this entire chain." A suffocating silence fell over the restaurant. Emily blinked in disbelief. The teenager by the fryer stood up straighter. Even the kitchen staff leaned out, listening, the tension as thick as oil in the air. Travis leaned in, his voice low and direct. "Now let's talk about how you've been running my business into the ground." Greg's bravado vanished. His arms hung awkwardly at his sides, and a nervous sheen of sweat glistened at his temple. He looked like a man caught naked in a storm, but Travis didn't give him a chance to scramble for excuses. Instead, he turned to Emily. "How long has this been going on?" Emily's mouth opened, then closed. She glanced at Greg, then back at Travis, her expression torn. Fear flickered in her eyes. Fear of speaking the truth, of being punished for honesty. But she steadied herself. "A while," she said quietly. "Months, at least. The kitchen's always behind. We keep asking for help, but we're told there's no money for more staff. Customers complain constantly. A lot never come back. And when it gets bad, Greg disappears. Disappears? Travis asked, turning back. He'll take long breaks, she said, carefully choosing her words, or just vanish into the office. Sometimes he helps, but only if he has to. The young worker who had dropped the fries spoke next, still shaky. People quit all the time. They get tired of doing everything while he just watches. Travis crossed his arms, his jaw tightening. How many have left? Emily hesitated. At least 5, maybe more. Greg finally snapped, the panic twisting into bitterness. You think this job's easy? It's not. You think it's all fun and games up here? You have no idea what it's like to run this place. The customers are rude. The staff can't keep up. Corporate doesn't care. Travis let those words hang in the air. Then he leaned in. Corporate doesn't care? Greg didn't flinch. That's right. You sit in some fancy office while we're stuck down here in the trenches. I've been asking for help for months. Nothing changes. And your answer to that, Travis said slowly, was to do nothing? Greg's voice cracked. What was I supposed to do? Lead, Travis said, simply. Greg rolled his eyes. That's easy for you to say. Travis turned back to Emily. Did you ever reach out? She nodded. I sent emails, called the district office. I never got a response. And there it was. Travis inhaled slowly. Somewhere between her pleas and his corporate chain, the system had failed. Her voice had gone unheard, the warning signs ignored. He looked at Greg one last time. You had choices. You could have trained your staff, supported them, led by example. But instead, you stood by and watched as this place crumbled. And worse, you treated customers like they were the problem. Greg's face twisted, darkened by defensiveness. You have no idea what it's like to be in my position. Travis let out a quiet, humorless laugh. No idea, he repeated. His voice held a firm edge. I've stood where you stand. I built this company brick by brick. I've been the one sweating behind the grill, manning the register during rush hour, scrubbing the floors when we couldn't afford cleaning staff. Don't tell me I don't know. Greg's bravado flickered, his posture slightly shifting, the bravado starting to drain. You weren't just failing the brand, Travis continued. You were failing them. He nodded toward Emily, toward the teenager in the kitchen. You had people willing to give their all, and instead of backing them up, you made their jobs harder. You let them carry the weight while you stood by and watched. Greg's anger dissolved into something closer to desperation. So what now? He asked, voice uncertain. You gonna fire me? Travis didn't respond immediately. He looked Greg over, not with hate, but with the tired judgment of a man who had seen enough. Greg had been given responsibility, and instead of using it to lead, he'd used it to hide. Finally, Travis stood straighter. Yes. Greg's jaw opened, but he had nothing left to say. No excuse could fix what had already been broken. Travis didn't linger. He turned to Emily. You're in charge, for now, he said. I'll be bringing in a new manager, but until then, I want you running the team. Emily's eyes widened, stunned. Me? You've been holding this place together, Travis said, and from what I've seen, you care more about this team than he ever did. Greg scoffed. You can't be serious. Travis looked at him one last time. Pack up your things and leave. Greg stood there for a beat, as if hoping someone would intervene, but no one did. With a loud exhale and a bitter expression, he turned and walked toward the back office, defeated. Travis turned to the remaining employees. Things are going to change, starting now. He watched Greg vanish into the back room. The tension that had choked the restaurant loosened, replaced by stunned silence. No one quite knew what to do. Emily looked caught between relief and fear. like she wasn't sure if she was about to rise or fall. The young man who had dropped the fries earlier glanced toward the kitchen, unsure if someone would tell him what came next. Travis didn't hesitate. He stepped behind the counter, rolled up his sleeves, and looked to Emily. "Let's get through this shift, then we'll talk about what's next." Emily stared at him, then gave a quick, determined nod. "Okay." She turned to her co-workers. "I'll take the register. Jason, go help in the back." Jason, once frozen with self-doubt, straightened his posture and moved with purpose. The cook peeked from behind the fryer, still cautious, but when he saw Travis begin assembling orders with swift precision, he returned to the grill. And in that moment, the rhythm of the restaurant began to shift. Minutes turned into an hour. Orders went out faster. The lines moved. Customers who had once been irritated started to smile as they received their food. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The energy in the room had changed. The weight on the employees' shoulders seemed lighter now that they weren't carrying it alone. Travis wiped his hands on a napkin and leaned against the counter. Emily stood beside him, out of breath but focused. "You've been doing 2 jobs this whole time," he said. Emily laughed softly. "Sometimes 3. Ben's today." She looked at him, cautiously hopeful. "What now?" He nodded. "Now we fix what's broken." He called the team together. One by one they approached, their faces wary. They'd heard promises before. They'd seen apologies turn into inaction. But Travis's presence, sleeves rolled, sweat on his brow, was something different. "I know you've been overworked, ignored, left to fend for yourselves," Travis said. "That ends today. We're bringing in more staff. No more skeleton crews. No more unanswered calls for help." Jason shifted, and Greg needed. "He's not coming back." The air shifted again, this time with the collective exhale of relief. Emily crossed her arms. It wasn't just him. Supplies are always late. Pay raises get delayed. We report broken equipment and nothing happens. Travis exhaled, shoulders heavy with guilt. "Then it's not just this store that needs fixing, it's our system, and that starts now." He promised immediate action, pay raises for those who earned them, equipment replaced, supply chains checked. But more than that, he offered something even rarer in corporate leadership: accountability. "I wouldn't be standing here if I wasn't serious," he said, eyes meeting theirs. "And from now on, I want to hear it from you directly. If something's wrong, I don't want reports. I want voices." Emily's gaze softened. Slowly she nodded. Jason hesitated. "Are you going undercover at the other stores too?" Travis smiled faintly. "Not quite, but I will be visiting, more than anyone expected." And those words shifted something in their posture. It wasn't a revolution, not yet, but it was the beginning of something that had felt impossible an hour ago. Trust. Travis looked around, the peeling paint, the worn floors. The eyes of his staff no longer wide with fear but blinking with possibility. This wasn't just one bad manager, he thought. It was a chain reaction of neglect, and it started with me. He turned to Emily. "You've been acting like a manager without the title," he said. Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're getting promoted." She froze. The surprise on her face wasn't false modesty, it was shock. "Are you serious? You've proven you can lead, now I'm giving you the power to make a difference." She blinked, processing it, then lifted her chin. "All right, I'll do it." Around her, the others nodded, quiet approval, earned, not granted. There was still a long night ahead. Orders to fill, trash to take out. But for the first time in far too long, this place had hope. And Travis knew, deep down, he could no longer afford to look away again. He spent the next hours listening, walking the floor, finally hearing the stories that had been buried for too long. The real work was just beginning. But this This was the first step. As Travis stayed behind to wrap up the night, he reviewed every detail he had witnessed: the broken equipment that had never been repaired, schedules that had been switched without notice, the hollow looks of employees who had been passed over for promotions they had earned. The damage Greg left behind wasn't just in policies or processes, it was human. People had given their energy, their trust, and been met with indifference. The most urgent concern was clear: staffing. The team had been operating with too few people for too long. That shortage didn't just cause delays, it bred fatigue, burnout, and a creeping anxiety that followed every shift. You could see it in their eyes, the way they glanced toward the clock, not hoping their shift would end, but hoping nothing else would go wrong. Now that Emily was officially in charge, she had already started restructuring the shift schedule. There was a new sense of movement, less frantic, more intentional. But Travis knew this wasn't just about schedules or registers. It was about restoring belief. Belief that someone cared enough to listen, to act, to fight for better. He made the first step that night. He called the district office, the same one that had ignored Emily's emails, brushed off complaints, and allowed this slow breakdown to fester. When the regional supervisor picked up, Travis didn't hold back. He laid out every painful detail, not as complaints, but as undeniable facts: neglect, undersupport, and disconnection. By the end of the call, there were clear commitments. Additional staff would be hired immediately, and no further requests from this location would go unanswered. Next, he tackled the equipment. The fryer had long passed its prime. The soda machine hadn't worked correctly in weeks. The registers were outdated, slowing down every transaction. Travis made a direct call to headquarters. He approved emergency replacements, not next week, not next quarter. Now. It struck him hard how easy it was to fix these problems from the top, and how long these employees had suffered waiting. The weight of that realization settled heavy on his chest. While those logistics were set in motion, Travis stayed with the team. Shoulder to shoulder, he rotated through stations, paying attention to the details most COs would miss. He noticed how the kitchen layout forced employees to zigzag unnecessarily, how prep areas were constantly understocked, and how no one had thought to advocate for change. But someone should have. That was the manager's job, and Greg had failed them all. By the time the last customers were served and the front doors locked, there was a shift in the air, a slow, cautious transformation. The employees gathered near the front, their bodies tired, but their eyes waiting. There was hesitation, yes. Trust doesn't rebuild in a night, but in place of hopelessness, there was a flicker of hope. Travis stood behind the counter, meeting each of their gazes. "Tomorrow," he said, "new equipment arrives. More staff will be joining us over the next few weeks, and from now on, if something's wrong, it won't take months to fix." Emily stood with her arms folded, cautious. She had seen leaders make promises before. Her voice was measured. "What about training? New hires won't help if they don't know what they're doing." Travis nodded. "We're building a real training system. No more throwing people into the fire without support. And for those of you who've stayed through all this, there'll be opportunities to grow. No more getting passed over." A few employees glanced at each other. The words were hopeful, but hope was dangerous when it had been crushed too many times. Jason, the young worker who'd once been scolded by Greg, looked unsure. "So, we actually have a future here?" Travis locked eyes with him. "If you want one, yes." Silence. Then, finally, a soft breath from one of the cooks. A small nod. A quiet release of tension that had gripped their team for too long. "That's all we ever wanted," he said. "A reason to stay." Travis understood better than most. People don't leave jobs that value them. They leave when they feel invisible. Emily shifted. "And what about you?" she asked. "You're the owner. You could have sent someone else. Why come here yourself? Are you planning to do this at every store?" Travis took a long pause. When he'd gone undercover, it was about one store, one problem. But now he saw the truth. This wasn't just about a bad manager or a broken fryer. This was about a system that had allowed people to suffer in silence. And if it had happened here, how many other locations were quietly falling apart? "I'll be checking in," he said. "Not just here, everywhere. No more hiding behind reports. I want to see it for myself." Emily gave a slow nod. That answer was enough for now. The team began to gather their belongings. They were still tired, but it was a different kind of tired. Not the tired that comes from being beaten down, but the kind that follows a hard day's work that mattered. They left with quiet hope, carrying the possibility that tomorrow might actually be better. Travis stayed behind a little longer. He looked around at the quiet restaurant. The place still needed work. The floor tiles were worn. The walls needed repainting. But for the first time in a long while, it felt alive. It had a pulse, a future, and more importantly, so did the people in it.